Testing 1, 2, 3. Here we go. Anyway, don't worry about that. Okay. Now, shh. Anthea and also Stephen, pay attention, please. Looking at this section in part 3, we have talked about part 1, we have talked about part 2. Now let's talk about part 3 here. Trophic levels and also energy. All right. You know yesterday from the 7 basic characteristics, movement, reproduction, growth, what else? Respiration, nutrition, energy, and the last one here, if I remember, stimuli. Okay. All of these are related in what we're going to do in the trophic levels and also in the energy. All right, and the background picture here will tell you about a photosynthetic process. So as I said to you yesterday, everything is connected. So you have to remember and you have to understand what is going to happen in this case here. Having a look here, this is an ecosystem in the savanna. All right, beautiful grass, lush, beautiful flowers, the gazelles, the wild buffaloes, right? You have the trees, you have the air, you have the land as well. Okay? What is most important here is that this is actually a dynamic ecosystem. All right? A dynamic ecosystem here is an interaction between the biotic and also abiotic components. You will come across biotic and abiotic later on in part 5 or part 4. I can't remember where it is, but I think it's part 4. Right? We're going to talk about those individually. But there is an interaction between those living organisms. Without the plants, the gazelles and the wild buffaloes will not be able to survive. Without them, right, you won't be able to clear the forest because there has to be a balance. There's an interaction between two components here you have to know. Not only that, these biotic factors, the gazelle and also the wild buffaloes, what do you see around them? It's grass. What do they need to compete for? Anyone knows? Food. Good. So although you have plenty of food here, but sometimes due to territory marking, this side here will be for the wild buffaloes and this side will be for the gazelles. I hope you can see that. But what we need to know within those areas, you need to have an organism which is strong enough to survive harsh environments or even adapt to a new environment and passing down these genes to the next generation. I will come across the term adapt, stronger, pass down, survival in many sections, and that's the whole gist of the ecosystem. It's an interaction. Hierarchy of the ecosystem. There is a hierarchy, and we know from the basic, a habitat. We all live in a habitat, don't we? We live on the earth. So we know that habitat is a place where living organisms reside. Basic, simple fact. All right, ladies and gentlemen. Later on, within the habitat, you have a species. Aha! Let's have a look at the moose here. You can call it a species, you can call it an individual. That's fine. Because let's have a look what a definition of a species would be. A unique individual of the same breed that breeds with each other, producing fertile offspring, which makes sense. Out of the 7 characteristics, you need to have a stronger organism, you need to have one to be passed down. All right, and these species will interact with one another to produce the fertile offsprings. All right, you will come into that later in adaptation, natural evolution, and also resistance. All right, these are all linked, but everything is linked in this case, and you have to know what's going on. Within the habitat, you have the individuals, right? Now, these individuals, we have a unique role for each individual, and that is what we call a niche. All right, niche, N-I-C-H-E. Think about it in a food chain. There can be plenty of unique roles, plenty of niche. For example, in Adelaide High School, what are your niche? What are your unique roles? You're all students, correct? I'm a teacher. That's my niche. So if you go into an environment and if you go and dig up those soil and the earth, you have the worms. They have a niche. What's the role of what's the role of an earthworm here? Yep, good catch for the both of you. You have to dig in the soil. It has to make way for water to go through, nutrients to be absorbed into the soil. So that is their role. All right. What about the plants here? What's their role? What's their niche? Can anyone tell me? Sorry? Yes, a source of food for herbivores. Correct? It's a source of food for many other organisms and it will pass the energy from one level to the next level. That's the niche. You have gotten that. So don't forget there is a relationship. Okay? Next one. It is also vital for balance because without these organisms, there will be a disruption within the ecosystem. Without the students, schools won't exist. And without the teachers and the students, there is no population within the school. Does that make sense? That is an analogy that you have to think about. Population, a group of the same type of species. Makes sense? Because from one moose, you have plenty of mooses here. All right, one big group and one big population. So this is a population of students that we are talking about. But within the population, you have a community. Aha. And this community are different and diverse groups, right? Different species interacting with one another. All right, you have the moose interacting with the monkeys, with the owls, and birds in the community. There has a different interaction. You have to see the connection between those two. All right. Initially, this will be very simple, but later on, when it comes to food chain, how energy flows through, you have to remember there is a connection. I've always reminded every of my students, everything in biology is connected. Even the genes that has been passed down, what sort of process that organisms undergo to pass on those genes? Replication, all right? And you need to produce the proteins as well, transcription and also translation. Does that make sense? Everything is unique. You have to see where the link is. Once you see the link, not a problem. And in the ecosystem, different communities get together and there is also still interactions between biotic and abiotic. So you see, everything is all interlinked, interconnected, but they have different definitions. Okay? As you can see, this is a non-examinable slide. We have a biome here. A biome is a major ecological community over a large geographical area. Put it this way, in the Sahara, right? What sort of a biome is that called? The Sahara what? Sorry, David? The desert. A desert is a type of a biome. Tropical rainforest is also a type. Savanna, the one I've mentioned before, is a type, but don't worry, this is non-examinable. Just to let you know there is a link. Next one, biosphere. This is when you have the sum of the entire portion of the earth. Ocean, land, sea, air, you name it, you got it. Continents as well, mountains. Anything that you see on the planet here, that is what is a biosphere. Okay? Now, you have seen this maybe in year 8, 9, and 10. So let's go. This is the original source of energy. Grass, for example, here. Okay? Now, the grass is eaten by grasshoppers. It's fair enough. Grasshoppers are eaten by snakes. So after that, we have the eagles coming in. Whew. All right, there is a chain reaction here. There's a food chain. Okay? And later on, when all organisms die out, and after a while, you have the fungi or the mushrooms here. And these have a unique role, a niche, we will call them. And what do? They break down bigger organisms into smaller organisms. This is a simple food chain. A simple food chain indeed. But let's try to see what the unique roles are. We go for the grass first, okay? On the top, they are known as your primary producers. It can be named as a primary producer. It can be also be said as an autotroph. And what is this function of an autotroph? They create their own food by photosynthesis. Aha! Where have we seen photosynthesis? In part 2, right? And this is actually the building of your glucose, and it has to be stored in plants. And also, the unique role of this grass, it is the start of the food chain. Without these plants, you will not be able to get anything. All right? Let's go back to that food chain. We'll move on with the grasshopper. Grasshoppers, as you know, herbivorous, all right, or the primary consumers. Please do not get this mixed up. Although we have a primary producer, don't get it mixed up with a primary consumer when you move on and say, oh, it's a secondary consumer. Totally different thing, all right? Or if you're talking about those organisms like grass, you can just say it's a producer. That's all, Okay? What is the niche of this grasshopper? Consuming the primary producer or consuming the producers, consuming the grass. These are known as heterotrophs. Now, question, if autotrophs create their own food, what about heterotrophs? Anyone can tell me? They have to eat their food. Good catch there, Livia. Good catch. They have to consume. They cannot build their own food. You have to remember that. Heterotroph is very different from autotroph. Auto means automatically we produce. Hetero, we have to depend on the organisms to live. Back to this. We'll move on to the snake. Carnivorous. Carnivorous only eats meat. Herbivorous only feed on plants. So the unique role for this snake is actually to consume the primary consumer and also the herbivore. So there is a chain reaction. You know, I eat something, I'm being eaten by something. But of course, this is not the case for human beings. All right. Moving on with the eagle. All right. It's also a carnivore. The unique role is to consume the secondary consumer or another carnivore. All right. But could I tell you, bearing in mind, tertiary consumers can also be omnivorous. They're able to feed on the grass. They're able to feed on plants. They're also able to consume other organisms as well. Okay. The last one. Once everything has died down, all right, the eagles have died, grasshoppers have died due to the fact that competition is so stiff, all right, you're not able to compete for the food or the natural resources. The mushrooms here will actually feed on the dead or decaying organisms. And this is an important role because when we are going to come into the nutrient cycle or the, what you call that, the nitrogen and also the carbon cycle, this has a unique role because what they're going to do is they're going to recycle the nutrients. Remember, everything in the ecosystem is always interacting and you also recycle. Isn't nature smart? Smart enough to recycle because there's no point I burn down the whole forest and recycle carbon. There are different ways to recycle carbon. There are different ways to recycle nitrogen as well. Okay? You would have seen the food chain. We move on to the food web. How do you define a food web in this case? A food web, look in front, guys. A food web is a combination of those food chains and they are interacting. Because think about this. If one day some sort of disease were to come over and conquer and somehow they just got rid of the grass and algae, and guys, what is this called? Algae and grass. What's the terminology used for it? They are plants, yes, but it starts with another P. They are the producers. All right? These two here are the producers. Without them, you will not be able to get food. So the question arises for the other organisms affected. All right? If these algae and grass are gone, what happens to this? They will be affected because there's no food produced, and everybody is going to compete amongst one another to gain that natural resources, to gain those, whatever that is left. Or may they, who knows, they might eat one another. Because remember, in the ecosystem, there is what we call survival of the fittest. All right, only the fittest will survive. So you have to also consider, we will come across this many, many times. And you have to know a change in one particular organism will affect the other. All right, the last one. I wouldn't say the last one actually, maybe the second last. Trophic levels. All right, you might have seen a pyramid, something like this before. And we have met producers, primary consumers, secondary and tertiary consumers. Now just have a look in front of you. The boxes I brought you is just an indication of what we call, a certain trophic level. You will come across the pyramid of numbers, biomass, and energy, and it will be in this particular shape. All right, and I'm just bringing you sort of like a live demonstration rather than giving to see you pictures. This is just an interpretation only of what I think it should be. All right, there is the 10% rule that we will always emphasize in trophic levels. All right. This particular section of a producer is what we call a trophic level. It's where organisms are positioned. So as we go up, producers, primary, secondary, and also tertiary. In any normal trophic levels, it is only limited to 4. But unfortunately, the one I gotten was 3. But anyway, you get the gist. And the reason why it's only limited to to 4, is because there's insufficient energy to support the fifth trophic level, all right? And that limits the food chain. When you saw the food chain just now, you only saw until the eagle, discounting the mushroom because the mushroom is only a decomposer, all right? So what happens here is actually this. Energy decreases up as it goes up the pyramid of energy, which is true because as you go up the pyramid here, what happens to the size? Does it increase? Size of the organism increases. There's a difference here. The size increases. Insects, mice, rabbits, frogs, snakes, fish, big birds, and mammals. You see the sizes, they're actually growing. So this is actually related to a process of growth, all right? Growth of an organism. So you need a certain amount of energy to sustain the organism. Otherwise, you go kaput, all right? But why do we consider this 10% rule of any energy pyramid is because the remaining is lost as heat and it's also used for cellular processes. Remember, to maintain an organism, you need lots and lots of energy to sustain it. All right? Now, you have seen something like this before. All right? The grass is known as the first trophic level. We also call this as the producer. All right? There is an interlinking between the words. You can call it the first trophic level or you can call it as a producer. Next one. You can call it the second trophic level or the primary consumer is interchange. All right? You just need to know which particular term to use. Next one. The third trophic level, snake. Next one, fourth trophic level, the eagle. All right, so this is a flow of energy. If you have noted the color I've chosen from red to yellow, red means full of energy, and of course, yellow means you're decreasing in terms of energy. That's the reason why color is just beautiful in biology. Who wants to do physics? Unless, of course, you're a real mathematician. You want to do physics? Okay, fine. Out from my class. Kidding. And at each trophic level, don't forget, you have the decomposers here to decompose whenever the organisms die due to starvation, competition, diseases. Does that make sense to everyone so far? Any questions? This is a big thing that we have to go through. Okay. In this particular area, we'll talk about these producers. You'll be exposed to two different terms, GPP and also NPP. GPP is known as the gross primary production. It is the rate at which plants will store chemical energy, or in other words, you can rephrase it. Guys, you don't have to really actually memorize this because the idea here is about a gross primary production. They utilize the energy from the sun to build up the food in terms of its chemical energy. You can do the rephrasing as long as the meaning says that there is a storage of chemical energy, it's available for growth, that's good enough. Right? Do not necessarily memorize point blank. Relate it, understand it, use keywords to give you a guide. All right? Keywords and pointers. You want to wash your face? Are you tired? No. Okay. GPP is the gross primary production and NPP is the net primary production. Now there's a difference between these two. One is the gross, that's the original, just assume it's 100%. But remember, as I told you, as you go on to the next level, how much percent of energy is transferred? Can anyone tell me? How much percent? 10%. All right. So this 10% here is available for this net primary production, the energy available for the next trophic level, and is defined as the GPP takeaway R. R here represents respiration. Okay. Now, in any future exam questions or whatsoever it may be, this particular section, I mean, it won't really test you that much. I mean, you just have to get your head around in terms of, producers primarily producing it and what's the available energy for the next trophic level. Okay, does that make sense? Does that make sense to everyone? All good? All right. But one thing you have to know, not everything is 100% absorbed. And why is that so? Let's have a look here. You have unsuitable wavelength. Think about it. During summer, when we tell you guys and girls to put on sunblock if you're going out, you will get sunburn if you don't put on your protection, right? Think about it. Do plants actually have any sunscreen on their own? They actually do. All right, I actually read this on one of the articles. It's an organic compound that coats the layer of the particular leaf. All right, it's an organic layer where it sort of like reflects the sun, and that is why plants don't really get sunburn. Think about it. The sun, I mean, the plants are out there, absorbing all the sun, and they don't get sunburn. I'm just thinking, goodness me, these guys are fantastic, and it's because of this particular molecule. I forgot what's the name because it's very long. All right. The second one, why isn't it 100% absorbed? Photosynthesis. You need to use the energy available for the process. You see, there's an interlink. You need to use it for a certain process. The third one, the rest will be transmitted just as heat. Just as how 90% is passed off as heat. All right. This is also transmitted as heat for the particular leaf and also the plants. Okay. Now, let's move on to the next one. This will be a few last sections and will be done for this particular chapter. All right. All the notes are available in your notes. And of course, if we will do a little bit of practice, because what I'm planning to do after this is to guide you in how to do, some sort of an extended response question if possible. Okay. But let's look at this, the pyramid of numbers. Okay. So imagine the boxes in front of you as the pyramid of numbers. I mean, it does make sense because as it goes up from one trophic level to the next trophic level, what happens to the number? Increases or decreases, anyone? Decreases. All right. So one thing that we like about this pyramid of numbers is that it can reflect the number of organisms in a trophic level. I mean, you have 10,000 maybe, or 15, oh, what was that? 1,500, thousand within that particular down bottom trophic level. And as you go up, it decreases 200,000, 100,000, depending. And it's a simple, easy overview when you want to compare in terms of the change of a population, all right, of a food chain. Not really of a food web, but more of a food chain. And that is why I highlighted this in green, because that is the go sign. Now, we go for the red signs, right? Two disadvantages is that you do not take into consideration the size of the organism. The numbers sometimes are too great to be represented, all right? In the pyramid of numbers, we have two particular pyramids which are inverted. One is due to the fact that it has a large producer. So you can just see at the bottom here, it's just a teeny weeny bar compared to the one on top there, 2,000 caterpillars, wider than usual. And why is that so? Because think about it. You have one big oak tree being able to support a large number of herbivores or even primary consumers. All right. Just imagine a tree and also have a look at the size. The caterpillars are not that big and it is able to live on that oak tree. That's fine. The oak tree is big, huge, humongous. All right. One thing about the producers, it's able to provide huge amount of biomass to the next trophic level. So again, guys, it's a transfer of energy. It's a transfer of organic molecules and also biomass to the next one. Okay, so just imagine here, I mean, no offense to those people who are, I'm not trying to say overweight, but, if you have skinny legs and you have a big body, that's a different question. All right, so sorry for that. I have to give you. This is also equally the same thing. You have an inverted pyramid of number with a large producer, and the fact at the top here, just imagine this, you have a skinny bar supporting a big one on the top, right? So we are dealing here with parasites. But think about it. What is the size of a parasite? Is it big or is it small? It's microscopic, it's small. So how can it support? Parasites here, funny thing is that they're usually, small in size and high in number. The amount of energy needed to sustain them is very minimal because just imagine if you're trying to feed off from, a ladybird is much larger than a parasite and the parasite is smaller. So the transfer here can actually occur, which is a bit, funny. So you only need a small amount of energy to support this large population. So a small energy is transferred from the ladybird to the parasite. Okay, does that make sense to everyone? Next, the pyramid of biomass. Okay, don't worry guys, just another few more slides. Just be patient. You see P, C1, C2, and C3. All right, and this here will be your biomass. And of course, at the side here in the decomposers, but just ignore them. But they are only just trying to balance up the remainder of your trophic levels. It gives an amount of biomass or the organic content in an organism at a particular moment. Good point, it gives a better indication of dry mass. Dry mass does not include water. All right, you're only including those which are real skeleton. And also, it can indicate the flow of energy. But the point here is this. It does not take into account the changes that happen all year round at different stages. So it's only taking into consideration the biomass at a particular point. It could be during winter. It could be during summer. So there are many factors that you take into consideration when you deal with the pyramid of biomass. Okay? And it shows no productivity as well. This is another one. Another skinny leg supporting a big body. Inverted pyramid of biomass. What we are trying to say in this particular case here, the phytoplankton is only showing a particular dry mass at the particular time. And this is usually during winter. Now, think about the environment during winter. It's cold, isn't it? So when it is cold, you don't have that much of sources or even sunlight for the particular phytoplankton to actually undergo photosynthesis. So therefore, the dry mass at the spot is actually very minimal. So that is why it is actually showing this particular pyramid. All right, so the rest, I believe you can read this on your own because it is very simple and straightforward. This is only just giving you into account what is happening in the inverted pyramid of biomass. The last one. This is the pyramid that indicates an amount of energy flown from the present trophic level from the autotrophs to the primary consumers, secondary, and also tertiary. This here is the very normal pyramid that you see. All right. It shows the flow that is present in a particular food chain. The rate of production is shown, definitely, because kilojoules per meter square per year is the unit, the very important unit for it. And it also does show an actual energy transfer. But one thing about this, right? Two things. It is very difficult to measure energy and very difficult to collect them. Energy values of two similar organisms may differ. So it's just like you and I, all right? Same organism, but because we have different mass, we have different sizes, we have different height, we definitely have different energy. I can say that most of you can run faster than me, so take a cue from there. Next topic, all right? So in this particular topic here, what I'm going to do after this is I'm going to reinforce with some of you individually, and we're going to see what we can do in the extended response. But put it this way, in the next topic on Thursday, all right, we will come back to another chapter. Mind if you clean my teeth, says the alligator. And what does the bird reply? On one condition, just don't eat us. All right, don't eat us. This is actually an interaction between a crocodile, the Nile crocodile, and also a plover bird. All right, this is actually a symbiosis relationship. The reaction, the interaction between these two. It is opening its mouth, all right, because one thing I found about these crocodiles, they actually grow their teeth annually. You know, if one teeth is bad, it can actually grow another time. But in order to do so, they don't have those dentist people to come and say, come open your mouth, I'll just take out all the itsy bitsy things inside. They can't do that. But they have to rely on someone like these plover birds. So while it is basking under the sun, opening the mouth, not that it wants to eat the plover bird here can actually come inside and just, take up all these itsy bitsy things in the teeth. And at the same time, giving it free dental floss. How good is that? All right. The next topic is what I've talked about, relationships. I also will talk about survival. I will talk about the natural selection. We have adaptation and also the last one on evolution. All right. There is one section in the part of the course that you're supposed to undergo in terms of natural selection, but it's just too long. All right. But I have to crash course this within one section. You only need to know the relationship between the 5 factors here. Okay. And that's about it, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. Anyone here who is not clear on what's going on, or you have a vague idea on what is going on, but any issues that you're facing at this point? None? Good. Now I can just stop the recording. Thanks.